All right, so we're starting into chapter seven. Chapter seven is this great little chapter on short workplace messages and digital media. So we finished all the preliminary chapters where we talked about the importance of communication, the importance of soft skills, the importance of team and teamwork. And then we moved into that 3 by 3 writing process. Now we're going to take the next four chapters, 7, 8, 9, and 10, and talk about different types of messages. And so, chapter 7 is about your basic short workplace messages. These are what we will spend most of our time in the workplace putting together. Um, so the first thing is talking about the difference in preparing digital age email messages and memos. There are certain times where we would use paper-based messages. Sometimes we'll use inter-office memos. Sometimes we'll use business letters. A lot of times business letters would be for external organization communication. Obviously, inner office would be internal, and we use that a lot of times. We'll talk about it a little bit later on the slides when we're wanting to keep record. Majority of our communication today, though, does take place with electronic messages, specifically email, instant messaging, and texting. And so we're going to take some time to talk about those basic things. So the question has been over the last couple of years, is email going away? And the answer right now is no, it's not going away. Currently, it is still the preferred channel for most business messages. When we are in the office, that's typically how we're going to communicate. It's the particular channel or medium that costs business people. On average, they say about 2 hours a day or more for some people. So most people spend about 2 hours a day checking, reading, replying to email. It's been basically the replacement for what we would typically do with paper memos. And it's also the substitute for some letters that go out to external audiences. Email is appropriate when we're wanting to put together something that's short, something that's informal, when we're wanting to give information or request information. It's a great thing to use when we're wanting to send the same information to multiple recipients and be able to archive that and show that we sent that specific information or requested that specific information from a particular group of people or person. And it's also a great cover document. We don't really think of cover documents a lot unless we think of facts, or at least that's the way I used to think. But I've had to transition my thinking because a lot of times we send longer attachments in email, and the email only serves as a purpose as a cover letter for those attachments that we are sending. So when we are creating emails, what are the best practices for that? How do we write a better email? And so some things to think about. First of all, don't use email if another channel would be better. So if I could do this quicker through social media, if I could pick up the phone and make this point in a better way and communicate it more effectively, then don't use email. Make sure you're only sending information that you would want published because anything you send work related in an email can be used. It can be gotten back to. It can be used in discovery. So you need to be very careful. Make sure you're only sending what you would be comfortable with somebody else reading. So don't say, well, I only thought Tom would read that, so that's why I felt comfortable writing about Judy. There's a good chance Judy will see that, accidentally get forwarded that. Someone will read it over Tom's shoulder. You need to be very careful. Take time to learn and to perfect writing a good subject line. It's very key. It's key to getting your information quicker and your response quicker. A good thing is to use dates and names if you can in the subject line, and they give you a good example there. Um, when we're replying to email, there's a couple of best practices that we want to think about. Make sure you always scan all of your emails. You should try to respond. They're saying here in 24 hours. I know different companies request different things. Here at CF, they require or they ask us to try to respond to email within 48 hours. So ours is a little different. And if you can't respond, it's showing here, let them know when. I'm not able to get that information for you, but I'll get back with you in the next 48 hours or the next 72 hours or by the end of the week, whatever the case may be. If you have a threaded email, that's kind of where you have this back and forth going between you and a group of people or another person. When the topic changes, make sure you change that in the subject line. When we keep the same subject line, it tends to be a little bit more difficult to follow that thread. Down editing is in your text. Make sure you take a look at that. A lot of people use that to help save time. That's kind of where you go into the email that was sent to you, you highlight the information you're going to respond to, copy and paste that down into your reply, and then just answer to those things. And we call that down editing. Make sure you always start with the main idea, and it's always a good practice to instill readability just like we would with any document. And you can do that through lists and headings. Um, there are good etiquette principles to use when we're dealing with email. You want to make sure you always obtain approval before forwarding, and a lot of people forget about that. But some people would feel very embarrassed by things that they've written, or they wouldn't have written it in the same way if they knew it was going to certain people. Try to stay away from sarcasm and humor. People tend to put their own slant on that when it's not face to face, even when it is face to face sometimes. All caps would be shouting, so we want to stay away from that. And we want to always try to soften our tone, and we can do that through using a good opening and a friendly closing. Um, when we're closing, some things to think about. You want to make sure that you end with due dates. So if you're needing things by a certain time, remind them of those due dates. Remind them of what you want them to do next. Edit. Make sure you definitely type. Make sure you look for and proofread for typos. Sometimes unwanted corrections happen and we think we've said the right thing, but they've corrected it in a different form. Our talk to text, if we're using that for our emailing, we need to be very careful. Add your full contact information, including your social media, and always double check before hitting send. Don't just type, 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 and then hit send. You always want to proofread and double check. Another good practice is don't put who it's going to. Don't fill that out until after the email is ready to go. I can't tell you how many times people have gotten in trouble because they have hit send prematurely before they're actually ready to send it. And if you'll notice, if you've ever tried to hit send and you forgot to put the person it was going to, the sender in there, it won't go. And so it's kind of a safe catch for you if you'll allow yourself to utilize that as that. Um, Sometimes we do want to go back to memos. We would want to do that if it's just too long for an email. If we need a permanent record, that's key there, that you would want to do something that was handwritten. Sometimes a memo can seem a lot more formal than an email. And sometimes all employees and people that we're trying to communicate with may not have that email. Um, there are a lot of benefits to instant messaging and texting. It's real-time communication to anybody, anywhere. It's really helpful when we're trying to share information very quick and make quick decisions. Um, it says here, enterprise grade IM applications instantly can connect different coworkers that are dispersed all over. It's a great way to be quiet, like when we're doing a phone call that's very noisy and people can hear at least one end of the conversation. This is a very discreet way of getting your messaging across. It avoids phone tag. Presence functionality lets your other coworkers know where each other are online, and also productivity can grow because users get to answer a lot more quickly, and they are able to multitask. Of course, there are risks with anything that you do. We've talked a little bit, and the book talks a little bit about risk with even email, but I feel like there's a few more risks in sending a text message or an instant message. So some of these you might want to think about. Just like with email, we have spam. Now we have IM spam, which is spam, phishing schemes, viruses that are there. Your instant messaging and your text messages, those can all be used as evidence in a lawsuit. So they are subject to discovery. So we want to be careful about that. If you are sending information between broker client, that type of information has to be kept. It has to be saved. And so those of you that like to clear your phone out and your messages out, and you can't handle saving things, that could be a problem because those types of things need to be saved and retained for 3 years. And it could be very overwhelming trying to track and store those messages. Of course, like with we worry about with our students or we worry about with our children, we have to also worry about, unfortunately, we have to worry about in the workplace texting being used inappropriately. People can bully using texting or instant messaging. We could also have the problem of sexting, so we have to be careful powerful. Um, Best practices, make sure that you are following what your organization puts forward as policies. Most organizations have a policy about texting and instant messaging. Make sure you're following that. Never put sensitive information out on a text or instant message. Make sure that you're staying away from anything that would be considered harassment or discriminatory content. Be very careful and mindful. It's not usually a good practice to forward links to photos, messages, memes. A lot of those things can be considered inappropriate, so you have to be very careful with that. Don't say anything that could damage your personal reputation or your company's reputation. Obviously, we don't want to text or instant message while driving. A lot of times when we're working on the road, it's very easy, we think, to keep multitasking and get things done. But I can't tell you the number of accidents that happen in a year. It's really crazy, and it's continuing to consistently move up. We don't want unnecessary chit chat with our texting. People that can, especially like these group text or group chats, it can really get carried away. So we want to make sure we keep our business contacts and family contacts separate, and we always want to keep our personal messaging if it is allowed at work. And a lot of times the policy, it's not allowed at work, but if the policy says sure, you want to still be respectful and keep it at a minimum. Make yourself unavailable when busy. My husband has his phone set to where if he's driving or he's in a meeting, that alerts the person texting so they know they're not going to get an immediate response. Keep your present status up to date. Don't blast multiple messages if you don't hear from coworkers. I have some people that do that to me if they don't get an answer within the first 2 or 3 minutes. Another text is going to come, and then another, and then another, and then another within a short amount of time. If I don't respond as quick as they think, don't be that person. Try not to use slang, abbreviations, confusing jargon. When we're using texting in a professional setting, we want to word it and we want to communicate in a professional way. So many people have gotten used to using slang and abbreviation in text messaging, and that's one thing if you're talking to friends. It's a different thing if you're talking to colleagues, and it's a whole different thing if you're talking to your boss. So you need to be very careful. And talk to text is not always your friend. Proofread, proofread, proofread. Podcast and webcast, those are really great and beneficial things. You want to make sure that you are looking into that. People are using those more and more. I'm seeing even more instructors that are starting to look into podcasts, like weekly podcasts for their class. They're elaborate to produce, though. And they do require a lot of quality hardware, so be careful with that. They can be played on any number of devices, which is a great thing. You can extend from just short clips to even larger digital files if you need to. They can be recorded so that you have a chance to really say what you want to say and kind of nitpick what you say. And they can also be done live. They can be streamed or downloaded on websites. So those are all things to think about. They provide quality content. There's something with hearing someone's voice when doing it. And they can help us to replace costlier teleconferences. They can help you to broadcast repetitive information that doesn't need any type of interaction. And the webcast can offer a friendly human face, but or you can do podcasts where you kind of get that feel of a friendly quote unquote face, but there's no, human presence there, or it can be pre-recorded, lots of things. Wikis are another thing you want to look at in the text. We don't do a lot of talking about wikis. Wikipedia is a well-known wiki that's used. It's a really great tool that makes it easy for multiple people to collaborate together on the same software and update things and modify documents all in real time, which is a really big plus. They're very helpful in crowdsourcing. And like I said, when working on a project together, when it's a lot of people and the same content, where it doesn't kind of muck the water, so to speak, and make it murky, you can limit confusion because it's real time update on the same version. It eliminates multiple versions. So that's really a cool thing. And here, if you want to pause and take a quick picture, 4 main business uses for wikis. We don't go into a lot of that. They don't ask a lot of questions about that on the exam, but definitely something you want to be aware of and that companies are beginning to use, as well as blogs. More and more people are using blogs and even vlogs. So you want to get into that. Again, not a lot of questions on the exam about that. And because I'm trying to keep the video shorter, I want to keep the focus on the things I know are coming up on the exams. But take time to read through these points and look at these points in your textbook. Um, Social networks, also very a cool thing, but we do want to make sure that we're making sure we know the risk of using a lot of social networking for the business. There is a chance of productivity losses. Things get leaked very carefully. Things can be very embarrassing if employees post things that are inappropriate. And you say one wrong thing and you get the wrath of not just one person, but a lot of people at one time. So we want to make sure that we have good guidelines when using it's not going away. We need to know how to communicate correctly through social media and social networking. But there are things that we want to create guidelines for, make sure we're establishing boundaries, setting good privacy settings, expect the unexpected, and being careful when we need to. Do's and don'ts of electronic media. Learn your company's policies. Make sure we're separating work from personal information. We don't want to send personal emails and iMessages, instant messages and text when we're at work or from work. So be very careful. When we are using electronic messages and media, we want to make sure that we're very careful. When we post, we have to be double careful of what we're posting, make sure that it's grammatically correct, make sure we're staying away from sensitive information. Obviously, no sexually explicit jokes, nothing inappropriate, no inappropriate screensavers. We want to be careful of all of those things. Don't download, again, videos, photos, clips. There's just certain things we use across the board. Don't use it to spread rumors. Don't use it for gossip. We want to make sure we don't open attachments that are sent by email. We open the door for a lot of nasty viruses and things when we do that, as well as downloading free software. We have to be very careful. CF is very careful about that with their employees. Don't watch streaming videos there at work. Don't share files or file services. It's very you have to be very careful when doing things like that. And we also have to be very careful about storing and taking up room for music, photos, especially when it's our personal music and photos. So that's it in a nutshell. Take time. It's a really great chapter to read through, a lot of useful information. This is a lot of where we live when we're communicating in the workplace. So it's a really good chapter to get a handle on. As always, if you have any questions, please reach out.